So today's lesson is going to be on functions. We saw some of the words associated with functions, but now let's learn more about them. So for those of you who were here for one of our earlier lessons, we looked at repeat loops. And for those of you who are seeing it for the first time, we might imagine having some like instructions here. So you say like when you start, this little B could maybe like move forward and then move forward again and then move forward and just keep moving forward. And if you want to move forward like 10 times, you could just put 10 of these little blocks. But one tool you can use to make that easier is repeating it. So you can say repeat 10 times, move forward. And what that does is it lets you do one thing over and over again, but it's easier to read. Like you can see that it's exactly 10. You don't have to count and you don't have to like copy and paste this block a ton of times. So using a repeat loop can really help save time and effort when you're doing something over and over again.
な
And
る
so
ほど。
functions are going to be the next level above a repeat loop.
Okay, just a little hint for the Japanese、
Mhm.
natives. これは
Sure.
前回のループのね、ちょっとレビューなんですけども、全部何回もリピートの内容を書くよりも、一旦この言葉、リピート10 times、10回とかって簡単に書いた方が分かりやすいよねっていう勉強をしたと思います。Alright, go on.
All right. So now that we remember kind of what a repeat loop is, the next idea is a function. So a function is instead of just doing one thing over and over again, you can take a lot of different actions that you can do and bundle it all into one thing. So for example, we have this cat here and it might want to introduce itself by saying, "Hello, my name is Cato. I like eating tuna and chasing mice." And then it'll meow. And so all of that is this common thing that it has to do all the time. It has to go over to this person and say its speech, and then it has to go over to the other person and say its speech. And so instead of having to write out all those things every single time you want to do it, you can say, okay, I'm going to make a function, and the function's called say introduction. And every time you want to say the introduction, it does all of those things. And that kind of saves you time. If you think about when you tie your shoes, you don't think about, oh, let me take this right lace and then put it under and then this other one and put it over and cross it and pull it. There's like 10 or 20 different things you have to do to tie your shoes. But in your head, you just kind of have one function. You just go, I'm going to tie my shoes, and you do the whole thing. So what functions let us do is define these single things that do a whole lot all in one go. So someone's asking what Scratch is. Scratch is a way to use these blocks to do code. And we're not going to be using Scratch today. You might have used it in the code.org exercises before this, but I'm just using some of the sample blocks to show what it might look like. So when we saw the words, remember the word define from our word list, and we had the word use with the function. So that's what we're doing here. So when we define a function, we say, what does this function mean? What does it mean to say an introduction? And what it means is I first say hello, and then I say my name, and then I say what I like to do, and then what like chasing mice, and then meow. So all of that is say introduction. And this is the definition. It's defining the function. And then when you use the function, say in your program, you could say, oh, we move over here, and then we do the say introduction thing. And then I go somewhere else, and then I do the say introduction thing. So that's kind of an idea of what a function might look like. You make a routine that you want to do over and over again.
なるほど。前回はループっていう言葉を使って、ただ繰り返すことを学んだと思うんですけど、今日のファンクション、関数では、そのループだけではなくて、こういった順番がいろいろある決められた内容のコードとか、いろんなオペレーションを簡単にこうやって表現することができるっていうのを学んでいくんだね。Okay?
All right, so that's the big idea. So the main thing to understand is that we're taking a lot of things and then we're doing it all in one go and making a little shorthand for it. So you say just say introduction and it means all of these things. The other thing we're going to look at is parameters. So that was the hard word from today's words, a parameter. And it's also known as an input. Parameter and input are about the same thing. So we might want to say, okay, maybe you don't want to just introduce yourself. Maybe you want to introduce someone else. So So maybe you don't want to just introduce yourself. You want to introduce anyone. So you could say like, okay, well, give me a person's name and then I'll introduce that person. So for example, we have this one on the screen on the left. So we would say, if I want to introduce a person's name, what you first do is you say hello. And then you say, this is my friend, their name is, and then you say their name. And you can see that we've used the input inside of the function definition. So that's a lot of words, but basically we're saying that you take an input and then you use it to change how you do the process. So before we were saying, okay, I'm going to say this thing, and I'm going to say this thing, and then I'm going to meow, and that was your process. And the biggest change here is that we do it slightly differently based on an input. So I apologize. I was talking a little fast there. I'll try and slow down.
That's okay. So
yeah.
関数でいろいろとオペレーションをするときに、それぞれのにインプットをする場所があるんだよね。これで見ていると、例えば自己紹介を、お友達の紹介をしましょう。じゃあ誰を紹介するか、お友達の名前を入れないといけないよね。で、決められた順番で、友達紹介の文章が出来上がるっていうふうになります。このインプットのことをパラミータと言うんだね。みんな大丈夫よ。We're gonna talk more about it in a breakout room. このね、今の説明っていうのはみんなで聞いていますけれども、もっと詳しくそれぞれの英語のレベルで、ブレイクアウトルームで勉強していきます。Alright, let's move on.
Yes. Before we move on, let's just take one last quick review. So a simple function that doesn't have a parameter means you do the same thing every time. So you have this series of 5 different things that you do, and all of that is one block. It's like say introduction, and that's all one thing. And you do these exact 5 things. So that's a nice shortcut if you don't want to have to write this out many, many times. So now then the difference is when you have an input, you can do a slightly different thing based on what the input is. Here, when input is the person's name that you want to introduce, and then you say, hello, this is my friend, their name is, and then you use the person's name. And so we could see how we might call the function. So the character might move around, and then it would introduce Greg. And so when it introduces Greg, it'll say, hello, this is my friend, and their name is Greg. And then when you do introduce Kenji, it'll do a very similar thing, but it's slightly different because the name is now Kenji. So the cat will say, hello, this is my friend, their name is Kenji. And when it introduces Tomo, it'll do, again, a very similar thing, but slightly different. It'll go, hello, this is my friend, and their name is Tomo. So if we wanted to do that otherwise, we might have a list of a ton of different things you want to say, and you'd have to go in and you'd have to change the name. But here we can say, this is a common thing I want to do. And then the only thing that needs to change is the name, which is the input.
なるほど。いろいろ中身がね、言葉とかが変わっていくかもしれないっていうことだね。All right.
All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take these functions and we're going to apply them to the old McDonald's song that we had before. So this is the last chance. If you don't have the Jamboard file, try and copy it now. And otherwise, we're going to get started.
みんなジャンボードの方は準備いいかな？このファンクション、関数っていうのが、例えば実際の歌を歌ってる時の歌詞に利用した時にどういうふうになるかっていうのを見ていくと思うよ。
Awesome. And for everyone who has their Jamboards ready, let's get started. So, when we look at these lyrics of Old MacDonald Have a Farm, we notice that there are some things that we're singing over and over again. So in the lyrics, we will see that we have this first part, Old MacDonald Had a Farm, E-I-E-I-O, and that comes up again later. And then we have a second part, the longer part, that has the animal and the sound. And so what we want to do right now is we want to take these boxes on the right, and we want to mark down the sections that are repeated. And so we want the same section to have the same color. So I might fit this smaller box over this top section.
なるほど。同じところ、
I'm going to let you do the rest. So you want to drag the boxes over the sections that are repeated, and then we'll try and make a function for them.
Aha. 大股の春ファーム、いやいやよ。お、もう一回言ってるところがあるよね、この歌詞で。みんなわかる？赤
わかり
い、
ます。
箱をそこに移動させてみてください。それが繰り返しになるよね。
All right, and we'll give everyone just another minute or two. I know people are probably looking around, figuring out how the Jamboard works, and you can just click and drag on the boxes and they'll move around under your mouse.
みんなやってみて、そしてコーラス、その赤い箱の部分がコーラス部分になるんだよね、きっとね。で、歌詞、いわゆる1番の歌詞、2番の歌詞っていうのを青い方で囲んでください。できるかな？
Okay,
Yes, finished.
so when you're done, hopefully people are starting to wrap up. When you're done, it should look like this. So
み
we
んなこうい
have
う
the
ふうになっ
blue
た？
section and the red section.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do it.
so now we can see we have some repeated sections. And we saw before that when we have stuff that we want to do over and over again that's similar, we can make a function to do that thing. And that makes it easier to repeat it later on.
なるほど。
So in the next step, we're going to do just that. So there's a lot of text on this page, so we'll go slowly. We have some functions defined here for us. So these big colored boxes are functions for us. So we have a chorus,
は
and
い。
we have a verse 1 and a verse 2. And later we're going to add some parameters, but first we're going to do it without parameters. So we have our first chorus, which was in red. And what we can do is we can again drag these boxes. And so instead of having all these lyrics here, we can represent the whole song just in terms of the functions. So we
なる
could
ほ
say,
どね。
first we sing the chorus,
うん。
and then maybe sing the verse 1.
うん。
And you can see that instead of having all these lyrics, we have a much simpler picture,
そう
but
ね
it。
見や
still
すい
tells
ね。
us everything we need to know to sing the song.
うん。全部の歌詞を見なくても、こういう箱の中のキーワードだけで全部歌詞が表現されてるってことかな。みんなもボックスを動かしてやってみて。4つ箱があるよね。
I'm glad I'm seeing some people have done it, and that's awesome. Some people are having a little trouble. And so what these smaller boxes are using the function. So over on the right, we've defined the function that when we say chorus, we want you to sing these words. And then when we say verse 1, we're going to sing these words over here. And when we say verse 2, we're going to sing these words. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use these boxes to replace the words. So before we had to write out, here are the words you sing, and then you sing these words. But now we can make it simpler by just saying, oh, sing the chorus, and then sing verse 1, and then sing another chorus, something like that.
なるほど。
Cool.
みんな
Yeah.
やったか
So
な？
when
はい。
it's all good, it should look something like this. So now we can see if you wanted to just give someone this, you could say, oh, sing a chorus, verse 1, chorus, and then verse 2.
うん。
And so that makes the lyrics a lot shorter on the final page.
とってもシンプルに見えるようになったよね。すべての歌詞はここに入ってるけど、とっても簡単な関数を使った歌詞の表し方だとこういうふうになるんだよっていう例です。
All right. Now let's move on to the last part, which is going to be adding parameters. So we saw before that parameters can change what the behavior of a function is. So before we had something like on his farm, he had some cows with a moo moo here and a moo moo there. But we noticed that the other verses were very similar. The only thing we changed is the sound and the animal. So we can see this function definition on the left. It has verse, and it has a parameter of an animal and a sound. And you notice there's So we notice there's like a parentheses and the comma, and don't worry too much about that. But when later on in CS, you'll see when you see functions, they tend to have parentheses like this to represent that it's a function. So we can see this animal, whatever the animal is, gets put where this green box is. So if we say a sheep, then when we get to that point in the line, it'll say sheep. And then when we have the yellow sound, then you could put the sound in there. So on the right, we can see some examples. When we have verse and the parameters are cow and moo, then we get the verse that we saw before. On his farm, he had some cows with a moo moo here and a moo moo there. And then when we say verse with the parameters or inputs of sheep and ba, then we get on his farm, he had some sheep, E-I-E-I-O, with a ba ba here and a ba ba there.
なるほど。そっか、関数の中のインプット、動物の名前と動物の音がその中だけで変わっていくことができるんだね。これがパラミータ、インプットのことになります。
はい。And so now it's your turn. So we've seen how we can use functions to make song lyrics, and we've seen how we can use parameters to change the verse. And so what I want us to do is I want us to make some verses. So I want people to come up with some new verses using the functions that we've seen. So we might, for example, have verse sheep ba. We might have this one is cow and moo. And so I want you to type in the chat, type some verses, type something like this, verse cow moo. And I'll look through the comments and I'll find some, and then I'll pick one, and then we're going to sing it together.
はい。じゃあみんなもこのパラミータをちょっと考えてほしいんだな。牛さんの場合は cow で moo だったけれども、他の動物とか何か考えられますか？ 牛。
All right, so I'll be on the lookout for some new verses that we're going to be doing.
Greg, somebody say giraffe, but I don't know what giraffe sounds like.
I don't know what giraffe does either. So I see chicken and duck. That's a good one. I see horse. Lion and cow. Is that the sound they make in Japanese? I'm not familiar.
みんな歌詞の中の動物を変えてみてください。A duck. Rabbit?
Rabbit. Ooh, a rabbit don't typically make sounds. I had a pet rabbit for a while.
Frog. Oh, that's a good one. Cheese. Ooh. Somebody say cheese.
Cheese.
What does cheese say?
Remember that when you say the animal, you also have to say the sound. So in chat, we want your thing to look like verse, and then you say an animal. So we go wolf, and it goes ooh.
Like this. Baby. That's a good one. Baby can cry, right? Wolf.
So a baby goes wah.
いやー、そうだね。Elephant. さあ、みんな考えてくださいね。面白い動物の名前と動物の鳴き声を教えてください。それがパラミータになります。ゾンビ。
Okay. So
I love their creativity.
I saw one. So I saw one. We can start with an easier one, and then we'll do a harder one. So
oh dear.
The one we're going to start with is chicken cluck. So this one in blue is the verse we're going to be singing together.
I have a chicken hat, kind of. All right.
And so if we need a reference for the lyrics, you can look at the box on the left here, the function definition. And anytime you see the green box, you say chicken. And anytime you see the yellow box, you say cluck. All right. So let's everyone sing together.
With the chicken.
1, 2, 3, 4. And on his farm he has some chicken. E-I-E-I-O. With a cluck cluck here. I need you to unmute your mics. We got to hear it all singing.
Everybody sing together.
E-I-E-I-O.
All
the farm he had a chicken.
E-I-E-I-O.
Quack quack here and a quack quack there. Quack here,
everywhere.
oh, I on had a wonderful
Awesome. I'm so glad I could hear all of you singing. That was really cool. That was really cool. Now let's get one more. Let's get one more suggestion that we're gonna do. Let's do something harder.
Oh dear. 難しいのやるんだって。
We had baby who goes wah. Let's see what else we can think of.
あーうわー Frogs?
A
Maybe.
rooster. A rooster goes kukuruku. That is a quite hard. That is quite hard.
日本語だとコケコッコーだよね。鶏はコケコッコー。
Mm.
It sounds so different in different languages.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, I like this suggestion. We've got a suggestion for verse.
Yeah.
With the parameters of snake and hiss. So let's try that one.
Snake.
So everyone
Ooh.
see in this blue box, we're going to do verse, snake, hiss.
あら。
And I
皆
want
さ
to
ん、
hear
ヘビ
everyone
よ。
sing just like last time. That was awesome. Ready? 1,
Okay.
2, 3, 4. And on
On
his
his
farm
farm
he
he
had
Have a
a
snake.
snake.
This is his area, and if you're his life,
It's like
he's there, he's everywhere, he's.
I don't want to have a snake in a farm.
I want to have a snake.
Oh,
You want to?
yes.
Okay. Thank
That's
you
a
all
good
so
one.
much for coming up with suggestions and singing with
Yeah.
me. Now it is time to move to our breakout rooms, and we're going to talk about more things that you can do in functions and how there might be functions in our everyday life.
Great. Thank you, Greg.